Hey, Tim, I just sent you some slides.
Okay, thanks. Since we have a couple minutes, I'll try to get them loaded into the data tracker. Okay, it's 5 past the hour, so I think we can get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mimi Interim, the last one before IETF 122. Let's get into it. All right. So as usual, please make yourself aware of the relevant IETF policies on things like intellectual property and the code of conduct. Today's agenda, we have Rowan wants to share with us an update on Mimi content. Rowan, did you end up getting the new draft up on the data tracker? I checked last night and it was still the one from December.
No, what I wanted to do is I wanted to get sort of a permission, like basically if folks are like comfortable with the direction of the changes. I made some pretty big changes. So with the whole, basically if people are like, yeah, this sounds good, then I'll make I think there's one small PR that's another small PR that's in there, and then update the I figured out a way to update the repo to add GitHub pages in place, which I tested yesterday. So I should be able to do all that and then cut a new version today.
Okay. All right, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then after Mimi content, Rowan promised that Richard would talk to us about iMessage and CMessage, which I have to admit, I'm not 100% certain what those phrases expand to. So does anybody have anything else they want to talk about today, or object to either of these items? Okay. In that case, go ahead, Rowan.
Are you interested in talking about PR 101 at all, or I'm gonna sort of I was gonna sort of bring it up in my slides, but
sure, we can talk about it. Last time I promised that I would do take a stab at the connection thing, which I didn't get around to, so that's why I bring it up. I did see your review though, and I'm happy to talk about it, but since I didn't have time to work on it, I'm not sure there's much to say.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, Mimi content. Next slide, please. Okay, so since there have been actually quite a lot of changes that have been merged over time, and because we've been talking about them little by little, like I kind of failed to notice how much time, how much stuff has gone in since we last submitted to Data Tracker. So we removed last seen in since 05, and there were a bunch of consistency changes. And then there are two big, there's one big PR that I finished yesterday, and then and this morning a small PR. So starting from the top, PR number 48. This is just a paragraph like giving guidance about how to handle multi-part, and like specifically warning not to double render inline content that's been referenced using a content ID. So that's up there. I don't know, Timo is here. So yeah, please, that was completed literally like 15 minutes ago. So feel free to have a look at that. I think it's in the spirit of what was discussed in the previous interim. And then PR number 46, that was designed mainly to be a chore for me to rebuild all the examples, so the examples would be consistent. So with the big structural changes that were made since we submitted 05, plus the removal of last seen, the examples were all completely wrong. So the CBOR examples now are generated from a script. So there's like a list of salts for each message. Then the messages are generated one by one, and each message then the message ID for each one is calculated. It goes into an array, or a map. And then later, when those messages are referenced in another message, it goes and finds the message ID that was calculated. And so that all works. It generates some nice CBOR. All that CBOR validates according to the CDDL. And finally, the EDN that's in the document for each example, the diagnostic notation, that gets, there's a validate script where each of those examples is converted into a temporary CBOR file and then byte-wise compared to the CBOR file that was generated from the script. And if they don't match, then it says, hey, you messed up. So that actually worked remarkably well, except for the long multi-part example was just a bit of a pain to debug. However, in the process of doing that, there are a bunch of things where things were a little bit inconsistent, and so it ended up being a slightly bigger overall PR. So because I was touching all the CDDL, we had this issue of timestamps where there was this issue for forever about whether we wanted to use tagged or untagged. So it occurred to me like, oh, we have this thing. We can, because it's CBOR, we can have either an integer or we can have a tagged thing. And so if we're going to do a tagged thing, actually the best thing for us to use is RFC 9581, which is CBOR extended time. And so that allows us to sort of, that gives us future proofing. So it allows us to either have just an integer millisecond since the start of the epoch, or we can have this extended time thing, which is tagged. So that's been in there. I used this URI, Mimi URI style names that are used in Mimi protocol. And the last thing is there is a length extension attack to SHA-256 that somebody pointed out to me, that basically if you have a variable length message, which is at the end of your hash, then you can take that hash and then you can make something that is a longer message that still hashes to the same thing. And the only thing you need to do to prevent that is to put a fixed length thing at the end. So I just tacked the salt again at the end of the message, and that solves that problem. But all the examples are built with this. So I just wanted to ask, conceptually, does anybody have any beef with any of these changes that I made here? Okay. Does anyone like any of the things that I did here?
Yeah, thanks a lot for rebuilding the examples. I will try to implement them in my implementation too, and see if my implementation passes all these examples still. And I did not look at PR 48 yet. I will look at it and comment on it if I have time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so these are the remaining issues. So we have, so quite a few of these are listed as has PR. And basically, once we merge these, I would propose to either close these or to, we merge, do a new version. And if you think that there are not enough people that are paying attention, we could potentially leave these open as tentatively closed or something like that with a new label, and leave them open until the IETF meeting. So that's this first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I created an issue because we have in the examples we are using the Mimi content extensions with an integer label, integer key rather, and we should register those two values. So that's a simple, like, something I can knock out today, do a PR for that. Then let's see, at the bottom, we have 2 issues related to delivery reports. And the problem there is that we just don't have a lot of implementation experience on this in the same way that we at least have a couple of different at least 2, maybe 3 implementations that I know of the content format. So I was just going to leave those. And then finally, we've got 4 that are basically proposing new functionality. And so I'm going to suggest that we say won't fix for these 4, but we could decide to do this at IETF. So what we would do if we do won't fix is we would document that this is functionality that we don't have in Mimi content, and we would describe how this could be added in extensions if we wanted to add it both, either as proprietary extensions or as standardized extensions later. Any reaction to that, particularly from the chair?
So my view is that if neither you nor anyone else who's actively working on this document wants to deal with these, then closing them seems reasonable. And if someone, now or down the line does want to advocate for them, then they're free to do so. They can be pointed to, like, I would use the issues that you've enumerated here as a record of the decision, like why do we think, expiration types aren't useful. But, anybody is free to argue for them later, because presumably not doing them now does not really in any way preclude doing them later, either as extensions or like in the current document if it comes up again before it goes to like working group last call. Yeah, long story short, I think we should, see if anybody actually wants to advocate for these affirmatively before considering doing them.
Okay. All right. Let's go on. I just wanted to give a brief update on kind of administratively on Mimi protocol stuff. So if you could please go to the next slide. So we have, just briefly, we've got things in a handful of areas that have been merged since 02. Franking fixes, changing the structure in the search to allow searching for multiple fields, which was already described in the text about something that you could do, but you couldn't actually do it, and a bunch of consistency fixes. And then we have 3 open PRs. Let's see. So going from the bottom here, I think one of these is just a simple fix. This was right now when you send a Mimi protocol update, it has a handshake bundle. The handshake bundle can have either a commit with some stuff, or it can have a proposal, a bare proposal, and then it can have some additional proposals because you might have more than one proposal. And those might be all grouped together. So when you remove yourself, you would presumably send a remove, a self remove for yourself, a remove for the an app data update to remove yourself from the participant list, and then remove proposals for any of your other clients. So you want those to sort of all be together in one unit. And so this just says that if you submitted a handshake bundle that was all proposals in a single unit, then when they're fanned out, that we fan them out, all the proposals as a single unit. 102, this is taking the stuff that was in the Draft Mimi app components, the participant list and room metadata, and moving it into Mimi protocol. I'll send a message out on the list about this. And finally, minimal metadata rooms. This is all about improved privacy and less metadata. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to make one observation about this, the MMR PR. So we have sort of 2 mechanisms that are built in here. So one is a credential for storing a pseudonym, and both like a pseudonym URI and the encryption of the real identity. And then we've got the key management for those things. So if we look at the list of issues, one of our oldest issues is about having the ability to have some other things which are encrypted that are in the group context. So both credential side and group context side, we have different places where we could have encrypted data that is encrypted from the hub. And we might want to do that in a single place and have a single mechanism for the key management for that. And then in general, like we want that mechanism to work, even we want it to have some sort of post-leaver privacy as after somebody leaves. Hey, Conrad, go for it.
Okay, thanks, Ron, for bringing this up. So yeah, we've been talking about this for a while, and we've always promised a solution for this. So right now in the PR, it says essentially there's a static key, and as Ron, as you rightfully point out, that's not a very satisfactory solution. we want something better, something that gives us the FS and the PCS that we all deserve. And so we promised a scheme that's essentially, it's really just a simple kind of key wrapping scheme where you have a tree of keys, and then you can, delete individual ones and then rewrap the key. Essentially, a very similar principle to what we do in MLS anyway with the tree. It's just that we haven't really written it up right now because it's useful in a bunch of other scenarios, and we're still not entirely sure how we want to specify the primitive to make it useful for a bunch of things. But we should probably just start writing it down for this particular one and then see whether we want to, go for other things in the future. So yeah, there is a solution in the wings, and interestingly, in the meantime, there's been a paper that's describing a very similar thing. So academia is also picking up on this, independently of us, I should say. So credit goes to them as well. So I think that's a good sign, and yeah, we should just go ahead and write it up. It's just a matter of doing it, which I didn't get around to yet. But yeah, I'll try to do that in the future. It's just, so one question would be, do we want to merge this PR only if we have this kind of PCS and FS key management scheme, or are we okay merging it and then leaving it as a to-do for us to add that in the future?
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, where are you going to get to that? Sorry.
I'm going to put my hand up as a participant.
Go ahead.
And say,
yeah, sorry.
I would be happy to have a clean PR that just solves the credential problem and says, key management to be solved in a generic way later. Just so people can see, like, this is how it works. And it also, like, it makes people understand where we're going without us knowing exactly how to do it.
Okay. Right. So that was the one issue, and then the other thing I also need to do is writing up this connection stuff. So yeah, I'll try to get these two done. I'm not sure if I can do it before Bangkok, but yeah, it's on my list. Yeah, thanks, Ron.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else want to mention anything about this or weigh in on the pros and cons? Are we okay with this way forward? Okay. All right. I got one more slide, and then I will pass the floor. Okay. So we've got. I just looked through the issues again. So we have. We've got 3 things that I considered like sort of pretty core. So we've got the pseudonyms number 84, which is covered by, we discussed as PR number 101. We have encrypted metadata in general, which is called, like, I don't remember the actual wording of the issue, but it's basically like the room metadata. So like if we have room metadata that's already in PR number 102, and we defined a format for it, if we want that to be encrypted, then do you want to be able to encrypt that, to encrypt that somehow in place? And then finally, the PR that's been open the longest and the issue that's been open second longest is the safe downloads, basically how we have a proxy method for downloads. So I'm going to try to take a stab at some clean text for this, but I'd like to go ahead and do a new version, merge, possibly merge 102 and maybe like a clean, 101 that's just a little bit here, and do a new version, or I can just do a new version with what's in the repo right now. and then we can discuss some of these things, and then hopefully we can also go through and kind of tick off some of the issues that have been sitting around for a long time that maybe people don't care about so much, like whether we use HTTPS or whether we use MLS. Like we can just like, kind of close some of these things maybe at this point. That's all I got, unless somebody wants to comment on that.
I mean, if you got some easy ones to close out, do you want to just pull those up and close them down?
Tim, what do you think?
So yeah, my opinion is that, the actual authors of the document, people actually working on it, should have the latitude to, close out issues if they don't actually intend to act on them. And just like the other ones we were discussing earlier, if somebody in the working group wants to advocate for doing something about one of these, then they're free to like chime up in a meeting, in the GitHub issue, in a new issue, and argue for it. But if neither you, Rowan, nor anybody else who's contributing to this document intends to take action on these things, then I'm not sure what the value is of keeping them open.
Okay.
In particular, since even a closed issue does hang around, so we would have a record of what the idea was and what the conversation was. So like, again, as I noted before, it would be important to add notes to each of these issues explaining why we think either we don't want to address them or we feel that they're already handled somewhere else.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Thanks for those slides.
Next up is Richard. Do you in fact have anything for us today?
I haven't prepared anything, but I don't like any slides or anything, but it does seem like there's some stuff we could talk about. Rowan and I have been going a bit back and forth, so I'll drop in the chat a link to the message I sent to the list a couple of days ago. You give me one moment. Rowan had been pinging me about associated parties and franking and things like that. And it occurred to me that we had been maybe thinking about things a little the wrong way in too many fragments. So there's the link to the message I sent. So we defined semi-private message to provide confidentiality of messages as they transit the follower servers between the clients and the hub. So basically, semi-private messages is providing an encapsulation that provides confidentiality of a message between a client and the hub to start with, and then the hub can forward that message out to the other clients in the group. So that's one security service involving the hub that we need. And then what Rowan raised with me was that franking has this requirement for integrity between the client and the hubs, the clients and the hub, to protect some of the metadata that the hub adds as a franked message transits it. So the only insight here is that these look like similar things. In both cases, you have a situation where you need a security service that can be provided by symmetric cryptography between the client and the hub. You either want to protect against inspection by the follower servers in the case of messages, of commit messages, or you want to prevent against tampering in the case of messages, and in the associated franking metadata. So really the more of a question / revectoring proposal than something real concrete. What was raised in that mail was whether maybe the thing to do here would be to design, a single encapsulation or a pair of encapsulations, a confidentiality C encapsulation and integrity only I encapsulation that was used for all messages between clients and the hub, and provided one of those two services. And of course, we need to set up the appropriate key establishment to support those services. And there's a few ways you could arrange that. But the idea there would be to replace what we're doing semi-private message with something that's less invasive of MLS, more at the MIME layer, and address the needs of franking in a potentially less complex or more unified way than the associated parties draft. So that's the proposal I made on the list, and about the same level of detail. Figured I'd put it out there at that level of detail before going into writing a whole lot of text. Since I figured folks like Conrad or maybe Timo or folks would have opinions, throw it out there and see what we think.
Yeah, thanks for the proposal. Just gonna jump in here. So this is I'd be okay with this. My where I come in mostly is with regards to the key management. So that's what I originally wrote the associated parties for. And yeah, it's a question of what we want, I guess. So your scheme is much simpler, much less complexity, less invasive to MLS, as you say. But then again, gives us slightly pure security guarantees in a couple of ways, which might be fine for our purposes. Don't have a strong opinion. Sorry, I'm typing back and forth to your message to remind myself. Yeah, just wanted to say that I'd be completely okay with this. I'm not against it, and think this might be a trade-off that's worth it if we want better separation from MLS and better and less complexity. Yeah.
Conrad, which security properties are you concerned about losing?
So in your scheme, you want to send a new secret with every commit to the hub. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then use that secret to facilitate the symmetric encryption between.
Yeah, in that
and...
sketch. In that sketch, I think that's what was there. And sort of iterating on this a bit. There's a few ways you could arrange, but yeah, in that scheme, yeah, you set up a secret per epoch that is shared between the hub and the clients, and the committer sending it. It's just a way to get it to the hub, right? If it's the clients, if you do it that way, the clients can just drive it off of the key schedule, but the hub needs to be provided with it.
Yeah.
Which is
so I think,
in some ways similar to associated parties, but doesn't bother with chaining things across epochs, and so it simplifies out some of that complexity.
what's the authentication story here? Because I think that's one of the biggest part of the complexity that you skirt with this is that associated parties, the associated parties have a signature key, and then you send it to where you have to, the key management part of it, really. I mean, what key would you encrypt it to and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I expect the requirements and mechanisms are similar, in that you wouldn't want the committer to have an authenticated HPKE key for the hub.
Do you want group members to agree on the key?
Presumably, that seems right.
And then do you want?
I would say yes on agreeing on the key.
Yeah, that seems right. Seems right.
Seems right. And then I think the one that's left is there's their associate parties also have signature keys in the, like, I think, oh yeah, right. So if we agree on the public keys, there should be a way to update them as well. So like, how does that come to pass? Do group members just put them in the group context somehow, and are they authenticated by the hub or associated party somehow? And if we want those kind of things, then we're kind of approaching associated parties, maybe minus the whole kind of, you can have multiple authenticated parties and you can manage them and kind of stuff. So that one I'm not super keen on, but
Actually, as I'm sitting here, I'm wondering whether we actually need this agreement property. And the mental model I've got here is that, like, if what we're basically doing at some level is just making it's as if the clients had tunneled TLS connections to the hub, right? Because you're just looking for an authenticated confidential channel to the hub. And if we didn't have follower servers here and everyone just connected directly to the hub, we wouldn't try and agree. It wouldn't occur to us to try and agree on the TLS certificate that the hub was using, for example.
although maybe we should. I mean,
Well,
given the state of
now
things.
that you mentioned
But yeah,
it,
no,
Barnes.
sorry.
But you see what I mean? Like, it's very common practice to have everyone in a group connecting to a server and not worry about cryptographically, connecting the cryptographic identities of that server.
True, but I mean, the whole point of the mechanism is that we do have the followers, and that's why we're doing this, right?
All right, but I mean, you got routers in the middle of a TLS connection, and like that. That's
Okay, I got what you mean.
right. Either way, you've got an authenticated, a confidential channel crossing some untrusted intermediary.
Yeah, I mean, the reason for the follower servers is because we don't trust the followers. We want to have this privacy where we don't trust the followers to learn about details about the group, but we don't trust the hub to know where the members, that when the members are connected to a follower, that the hub doesn't get to know the private information about the WebSocket or push token that's associated with the follower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
no, where I'm just going with that is
TLS for that, right? Because then we would lose that whole property. That's why we have followers, and why we didn't just do this all with oblivious HTTP, for example.
Yeah. No, I mean, where I'm going with that is, like, and this may just be an intuition straw man, is that, like, one way you could achieve confidential, integrity protected communications between the clients and the hub is just to have either an actual tunneled TLS connection or a one-to-one MLS session between each client and the hub. Right? That would provide the confidentiality and integrity properties we're after here. And the only drawback really would be that it doesn't have a broadcast properties. So that the hub would have to re-encrypt individually for every. It doesn't have a broadcast property, and it doesn't have agreements.
Yeah,
and
I would.
I'm not sure either of those is really salient.
I would not be comfortable with the scale of one-on-one MLS connections. I think that would be a deal breaker.
So how would it work with so say I'm connected to a hub via a follower. How do I get hold of the HPKE key that I'm supposed to encrypt stuff to?
You could do something like expose a key package that includes a certificate.
I have your sort of like 8 steps or whatever. I could forward that to the group if you want. It's in my page.
Because it's going to reach me via the follower, right? And if I neither have any authentication guarantees from the hub, which and nor do I have like agreement within the MLS group that I'm in, how do I know it's not my hub? My follower just doesn't man in the middle me on the spot. like I'm getting the HPKE key through my follower, but it's completely unauthenticated. And my follower just, switches it out with its own key, and then I encrypt everything to the HPKE key, and my follower just.
Well, I mean, if you don't have any absolute reference for the hub, the best you're going to do is kind of a non-collusion among followers property.
Well, if I have agreement in the MLS group, I'm getting much stronger guarantees, right? Then now the follower
No, you're getting a non-collusion property, because like if the clients are behind followers A, B, and C, and followers A, B, and C are all lying in the same way, then your agreement property doesn't give you anything. Everyone believes
presumably
the
the
lie.
hub, the hub would see the group context and could check if its own key is in there.
No, okay, fair enough.
Just saying.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's kind of tofu, which this is not bad if we want to avoid the complexity.
I mean, but I suspect we're going to want the client to have some sort of absolute anchor for the hub anyway, even if it's just like, I want to join this room ID, which has some identifier for the hub in there.
Yeah.
And once you have that absolute thing to authenticate, you can just authenticate that thing.
So, but then we need a mechanism to do that, right? I mean, we don't have that yet, I think.
But I mean, if it's domain names, which we've assumed for the servers, then you can just use things like web PKI certificates.
And then retrieve those. Like, so you would have an endpoint at the hub that gives out a signature key that the hub uses to authenticate everything.
It just hands out key packages so that you can establish a one-to-one MLS.
Sure.
It exposes something to which you can do tunneled TLS, right? It's roughly the same thing with Mutandis Mutandis.
Sure, that will work too.
Oh, okay. So I think this question is, whether we need agreement is a good one. Which one we can have some thinking on.
Like, I'm not stuck on that. Like, if we have another way of getting some guarantee that the follower isn't man in the middling us, I'd be more comfortable.
So just so folks are aware, like the mental models I've had for this of conceptually simple, maybe quite conceptually, ways you could do this are, a bunch of one-to-one channels, right? One per client between the client and the hub. You could instantiate a second MLS group per room that has the clients and the hub. So the hub becomes an extra member. In that case, you do get the group agreement property.
That'll work.
And has some different cost profiles. And then the third option is something like what I put on the list, where you use some extra mechanism to synchronize a symmetric key between the group and the hub. So those are kind of my three thought experiments I go through on this. Like, they seem, the first two seem conceptually simpler than inventing much more, but may have some different costs.
And on this kind of scale, associated parties is kind of an optimized version of not having to have a second MLS group. It's kind of trying to shove the hub into the MLS group as a underprivileged member that's only there for a second kind of layer of key agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm kind of going off of this message. I asked Richard, how would external commits work? And basically what Richard outlined is that because you have the hub has some key that it can sign things with, so that you have integrity with the key, and that can be encrypted too. The external committer just picks a new hub secret, encrypts it, and sends it on. So a few comments, right? So one is that if the we've just reduced the security of the system to the quality of the random number generator on the external committer for that
That's-
epic.
That's true. That's true anyway.
That's in the nature of MLS external commits, yeah.
Yeah.
Then I'm trying to think if we can recover from that, right? And then the other thing was this authenticity of the hub key. So if the hub key is somehow related to or derived from the the public key that's in the external senders for the hub, that would tie these things together a little bit more tightly in a way that I would feel more comfortable with. So those are the two kind of technical things that I was thinking of. And then, I'm also was also thinking about, like, how do we make sure that there's no two-time pad? I'm sure that's just that, there's just some construction we can come up with to make sure that happens. But
Give me no nonce reuse.
Maybe,
yeah, so those are the technical things that came up for me.
No, good points. Maybe since you mentioned we already have external senders, it kind of I kind of missed that. So maybe that would be a good middle ground where we don't change anything in MLS. We just have the hub as an external sender, and then everyone will authenticate HPKE keys based on that signature key, which is almost as good as agreeing on the HPKE key within the group. That'd be okay for me.
I was actually my brain was going somewhere different with external senders, which is that for the case where you need integrity protection only from the hub to the clients, you could just send a public message, sign it, and broadcast to the clients. But that doesn't cover some of the other cases. It doesn't cover the confidentiality case. It doesn't cover integrity from clients to the hub.
Okay, but I mean, we can cover the confidentiality. I mean, that sounds good. We can cover the confidentiality stuff with an HPK key signed by the key that's in the group as an external sender, and then I think that would cover that bit.
Yeah, Rowan, that's a good question in the chat for the chairs. We were talking about inventing some crypto stuff here. Is your read of the charter that crypto stuff is off limits?
I think that my read wasn't, it wasn't per se crypto stuff. It was that if it's not inside of an MLS encrypted message or something related to the profile about how you do it, that was something that I was originally told was off limits for us. And I broke the rules a little bit, and I had some great heartburn about it when we said that, well, somehow the hub, the follower needs to send to their client, needs to send the hub accepted timestamp. And that wasn't even like, it just said you need to do it somehow. We don't care where you stick it in your proprietary client to server protocol. This sort of cranks it up a little bit. I mean, I guess you could squint at it and say, well, it's just the wrapper for your MLS, right? But yeah, I'm real curious from Tim and Alyssa's perspective what they think about this.
So if the work that you're talking about wouldn't happen here at Mimi, then where? Are you talking about taking this to MLS or to CFRG, or both?
No. I mean, if we went and let's say that we went and did this in Mimi, but the thing that we built, I mean, wherever it got built, the fact that we would be saying, okay, for Mimi to work, you need to go and use this thing that the client has to implement so that it can get confidentiality with respect confidentiality to the hub and integrity from the hub. That would be a bit of a shift.
There's like a bunch of things that the clients need to implement in order for Mimi to work that aren't being specified in the working group. So if that's the question, I think it's fine. I mean, we have to assume a bunch of those things.
I mean, we called out in the charter specifically that there are a bunch of things that the client has to do that are either related to the MLS profile or that are inside the encrypted, are encrypted inside of MLS. But the things that are like outside of MLS, that's the place where I was a little uneasy.
Well, I guess this seems like a little bit of a different category. This isn't like do the MLS stuff in MLS. This is like something that wouldn't get done in MLS, but we need it. So let's do it. And it might get, if it gets reused in some other context, fine. I mean, I'm looking at the charter and I don't see the place that's preventing us from doing this.
I mean, there is a prohibition in there on extensions to MLS, but explicitly what we're talking about is not touching MLS. So
yeah.
Rowan, does that ease your heartburn?
I mean,
you seem the only one having challenges here.
If the chairs are both like, "Hey, I don't see any problem," then I'm not gonna open that can of worms. But I don't want to go there unless the chairs are both like, "Yeah, layout looks good to us." So
Yeah, it seems fine to me. I'm not sure why anybody would get mad about this.
okay, and are we at all worried about implementers not wanting to implement this because we've added slightly more scope? I think my personal opinion on this topic is that they would more care about the total level of complexity rather than whether this was an MLS thing or a Mimi thing that we defined.
Right. I mean, I think as Liz was observing, implementers already presumably have to do a ton of work to deal with MLS, Mimi content format already. It doesn't seem like this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, especially since it provides useful functionality.
All right. Well, this sounds like something where maybe Rowan and Conrad and I can iterate a little bit and see where we end up.
Sounds good.
But I think the overall idea here is like, let's create we've got the end-to-end just among the client security layer. Let's now create a security layer that's clients in the hub.
Unmute. Right. So that was my question: is what's the next step here? Are we looking at, say, a pull request on Mimi protocol?
Yeah, probably, or at least an issue or mailing list post with some more concrete details.
I mean, maybe a small standalone draft that is just like, hey, like this is the concept, so people can read it and understand it, and then if people are like, yes, let's do that, then we PR it into Mimi protocol.
Sounds good.
Great. Thanks, Rowan. Okay. Given that he turned off his camera, it sounds like Richard is done with that topic. So that's everything we had on the agenda today. We have a little over an hour left on the clock. So if anybody has anything else they'd like to talk about, they're welcome to. The floor is open. Otherwise, we can adjourn early. Okay, let's call it. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in something like a month at IETF 122. And as a reminder, we still don't have anything concretely on the agenda there, so please reach out to us, the chairs, by email, on the list, however, if you would like to reserve some agenda time to discuss something. Thanks. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.